Summary of No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre. After arriving in hell, Joseph Garcin is greeted by a kind valet who leads him to a drawing parlor. There are 3 colored chairs in the room and a big bronze sculpture on the mantel. Garcin knows that he will spend all of eternity here. Second Empire furniture, he says, looking a little put off by the style. He thinks, I dare say one gets used to it over time, but the valet says, some do. A few don't. As Garcin settles in, he wonders where the torture tools are, pointing out that the drawing room isn't what most people think of when they think of hell. The servant asks, really, sir, how could you believe such nonsense? Said by people who have never been here. After helping Garcin get settled, the butler leaves, telling Garcin that he can call him by hitting a small bell. But he says that the bell isn't stable and only works sometimes. After he leaves, Garcin looks at the brass ornament and then sits on the couch without much thought. After a while, he jumps up and rings the bell, but nothing happens. He tries to open the door as well, but it won't move. He finally gives up and goes back to the couch in a sad mood. But as soon as he sits down, the door opens and the butler walks in with Inez. He asks, did you call, sir? Garcin says, no. The valet then tells Inez that this sitting room will be her home for the night. He gives her a chance to ask questions, but she doesn't say anything, so he tells her that she can ask Garcin anything she wants since he asked so many. He leaves at this point. Who is Florence? Garcin tells Inez that he doesn't know. Ah, so that's how it goes, right? She says, torture by separation. She thinks Garcin is her torturer, but he quickly tells her that they are both in the same situation. After they agree on this, they both notice that the drawing room doesn't have any mirrors. Inez is sad that she and Garcin can never leave the room, even to go for a walk. In answer, Garcin says that he too would rather be alone. Once more, the butler comes in. This time, he leads Estelle into the living room. Garcin is hiding his face because Inez told him in a very angry way that he keeps making disgusting facial expressions without meaning to. Estelle yells, no, when she sees him sitting with his face hidden. Stop looking up. I can see what you are trying to hide with your hands. I know you've lost all your face. She tells him she thought he was someone else, but when he takes his hands away, she sees she was wrong. She feels embarrassed and asks the valet if anyone else will join them. He tells her that they will be the only ones there. She then laughs because she thinks the chairs are ugly. She says she can't sit on the only empty seat because the color doesn't go with what she's wearing. When Inez hears this, she quickly offers her couch, but Estelle is still not happy. She says that the only couch she would like is Garcin's, so he gives it to her. Estelle meets Garcin and tells him how grateful she is that he gave her his couch. As he bends down to say his name, Inez steps in front of him and says, I'm Inez. When they are done making greetings, the butler leaves, and Inez tells Estelle how beautiful she is. Then they talk about how long it has been since they died, and Estelle tells the story of her own funeral, which is happening as they talk. She says that her best friend isn't crying because she can see what's going on. She says that her husband stayed at home because he was too sad to go. She says she died of asthma, but Inez says it was a gas stove that killed her. Garcin, on the other hand, says that he was shot 12 times. As the group talks about their old lives, Garcin says that he left behind his wife, whom he is watching as she makes her way to a barracks, where she wants to see him because she doesn't know he's dead yet. Those big, sad eyes of hers that always looked like she had died for something, he says. Oh, she drove me crazy. When Estelle and Inez wake him up from this picture, Estelle says out loud, I don't understand why the 3 of us are here. When Garcin says it's pure luck, Inez laughs and says, I tell you, they've thought it all out. Even the smallest details. There was no room for chance. Then, to figure out why they're all in hell together, they ask each other why. Estelle, on the other hand, says she doesn't know and says there must have been some ghastly mistake. Inez doesn't believe this, so she tells Estelle to tell them about her life. Estelle says that her parents died when she was young, leaving her to take care of her brother. She was very poor, so she married a rich man who was much older than her. She says that she met the man she was meant to love 2 years ago, but she turned down his offer to run away with him. She died soon after from influenza. After she tells this story, Garcin asks, "Tell me, do you think it's wrong to stand up for what you believe in?" When Estelle tells him that no one could blame anyone for what happened, he says that he ran a peaceful newspaper. So, in line with his morals, he refused to join the army when the war started. Inez is tired of hearing Garcin and Estelle talk about how good they are. She says, "What's the point of acting and trying to throw dirt in each other's eyes?" This makes them all fight for a few minutes, until Inez finally figures out why they are all in the same room. She tells them that they are supposed to hurt each other and calls it simple. Garcin is shocked and says that he will never hurt either of them again. To do this, he tells everyone to stay on their own couches and not say anything. Even though Estelle and Inez both agree, neither one of them can keep quiet. After only a few moments, Estelle starts to complain that she doesn't have a mirror to check how she looks. Inez, who is interested in her, tells her to look into her eyes to see a reflection. Estelle, on the other hand, doesn't like what she sees and finds it scary that she can't change the way she looks. She says, "I'm going to smile, and my smile will fall into your eyes, and God only knows what it will turn into." Inez says she'll do whatever she wants and promises to tell her exactly what she looks like in order to get her attention. Estelle thinks it's strange that Inez likes her so much and says she wishes Garcin would pay attention to her. This makes Inez mad, so she yells at Garcin until he speaks up. He gets angry and tries to get the women to be quiet, but Inez tells him that they can't shut each other out. She tells him that no matter what he does, she will feel his presence and know that Estelle is thinking about him. So, Garcin finally breaks his quiet and offers that they all tell each other why they're in hell. He thinks this will help bring their specters into the open. So, he tells them that he cheated on his wife most of the time he was married. He even brought a lover back to his house and had sex with her while his wife was there. His wife made them coffee when he and the woman woke up in the morning. Next, Inez says that she moved in with her cousin and started having an affair with Florence, who was married to her cousin's husband. She says that she has crept inside her skin, making it impossible for Florence to be happy without her. So, Florence left her husband. Soon after, he was hit by a tram. After he died, Florence got out of bed in the middle of the night and put herself and Inez to death by turning on the gas stove. After Inez and Garcin persuade her to tell her own story, Estelle says that she had a baby because of her love affair. She and her boyfriend Roger went to Switzerland together because she didn't want anyone to find out. Roger was thrilled when she gave birth, but Estelle threw the baby into a nearby lake and killed it. Roger shot himself in the face when they got home, and Estelle's husband had no idea what was going on. Now that the people who live in hell have told their stories, Garcin suggests that they help each other by being kind, but Inez says there's nothing they can do to stop them from hurting each other. After all, she can't stop caring about Estelle, so she can't stop hating Garcin. Estelle sees what's happening to her family and friends on Earth for a moment, but she soon learns that she has dropped out of their hearts. She wants Garcin's attention even more because of this. Inez tries again to get her attention, but she spits in her face to get rid of her. So, Inez curses Garcin, who now feels overworked and no longer cares. He doesn't care what happens, so he shrugs and agrees to date Estelle. As he tries to do this, though, he spirals into a picture of his coworker Gomez talking about him on Earth. He sees that everyone thinks he's a fool for leaving the war, and it soon becomes clear that he just ran away and was caught trying to get away. Still, he wonders if he was really a fool because he doesn't know if he ran away because he was afraid or because he thought it was the right thing to do. As he talks about these thoughts, Garcin knows that he will never be able to change how his coworkers feel about him. He asks Estelle to tell him that he isn't a wimp because of this. She agrees happily, but Inez tells him that Estelle will say anything to please him. Garcin is so angry that he runs to the bell and tries to ring it, but it doesn't work. So, he pulls on the door and screams for it to open. He was very surprised when it suddenly opened. He stands on the doorstep for a moment, but he can't bring himself to leave. He quietly closes the door and says that he has chosen to stay because of Inez. He says that Inez understands this because she knows what wickedness is. He wants her to think he's not a wimp because she doesn't care about him. He thinks that changing her mind will show once and for all how brave he is. No matter how much he tries to get her to comfort him, she won't. He says that he was judged for a single action, but she says, it's what you do, and nothing else, that shows what you're made of. Estelle tells Garcin that he should kiss Inez to get back at her for making him mad. He agrees that this is a good idea, but as he hugs her, Inez makes sure he knows she's watching, which stops him from going on. You will always see me, he says. Always, she tells him. He pulls away from Estelle, upset, and says, so this is hell. I never would have thought it. You remember everything we were told about the torture cells, the fire and sulfur, and the burning marl. Legends from the past. You don't need red-hot pokers. Other people? Estelle is angry that she was left alone, so she gets a paper knife and stabs Inez, but Inez just laughs and tells her that they are all dead and will stay that way forever. All three people in hell find this oddly funny, so they throw their heads back and laugh hard at their situation until they finally stop laughing and slump into their chairs. Garcin says, well, let's get on with it.
About the author. Jean-Paul Sartre was born in Paris and lived there for most of his life. He studied philosophy at the École Normale Supérieure until 1929. That same year, he met Simone de Beauvoir, an existentialist female philosopher who would become his lifelong partner. Sartre taught for most of the 1930s in Le Havre, a port city in northern France. He moved back to Paris in 1937, but when World War II broke out in 1939, he was forced to join the French army. He worked as a meteorologist in Alsace, which is on the eastern border and is where his mother's family came from. But he was caught and held as a prisoner of war until 1941. When he got back to Paris while it was still held by the Germans, he took part in the secret resistance to the occupation to a limited extent. He also wrote many of his most famous works, such as Being and Nothingness, the plays No Exit and The Files, and The Age of Reason. He quit teaching and moved back in with his mother in 1946, when he was at the height of his fame. After this time, Sartre's writing and public image became much more political, especially against colonialism. He swore allegiance to Marxism, even though he no longer liked the Soviet Union after 1956. He spent most of the 1950s trying to combine his nihilism and Marxism in works like Search for a Method, 1957, and Critique of Dialectical Reason, 1960. It is known that Sartre publicly backed the National Liberation Front during Algeria's War of Independence from France. He also became friends with the famous psychiatrist and revolutionary Frantz Fanon. He was given the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964, but he turned it down, becoming the first winner to do so. He said that the prize was unfair to thinkers from outside of Western Europe and that a writer should refuse to let himself be transformed into an institution. He spent most of the 1960s writing a huge biography of Gustave Flaubert, a French writer who lived in the 1800s. But he quit suddenly in 1971 to focus on political organizing, and he never finished the last book. Around the same time, Sartre's health started to get worse. He died in April 1980 of pulmonary edema.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.